You're it. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It, Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you, because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of You're It, Girl. How has your week been? I'm curious so far what your favorite episode has been. So comment below this episode, or you can also message on Instagram. I'm just curious so far who your favorite guest is and what your favorite topic is that we've been talking about. And also I wanted to give a little thank you out to my production man, Nick Tantillo with Tantillo Productions. He's always making me sound so good. A lot of you have commented on how good this podcast sounds, and it is all thanks to him. So thank you, Nick. You cannot see him, but he is behind the scenes. So the last episode, we left off on dating lessons learned the hard way. We talked about lesson 1. Now, if you remember from the first 2 podcasts, I've been in the same relationship since I was about 19 years old. I went from serious relationship to serious relationship to marriage to serious relationship. Basically, I've never been alone. And finally, in the fall of 2021, I became single for the first time since I was 17 years old. Yeah, I know. Wow. It's a little bit embarrassing, a little bit crazy if you actually think about that. And maybe it actually protected me from a number of things I would have experienced in my 20s that I did not, in fact, have to experience. But what this means is that once I was actually single, I had some dating to do, and I had some major catching up to do. And there were some lessons that needed to be learned, and they were learned quite quickly. Because when you're dating in your 30s, I imagine it's a lot different than when you were dating in your 20s, which I never experienced, and as dating as a teenager, which was really my only experience prior to 2021. And so the very first lesson that I learned was this lesson number 1, that a lot of baggage can fit into one little carry-on. And sometimes that's one suitcase too many. My friends refer to this story and this person. You know, girls, we always come up with a label for a guy. Like there's always some sort of name they have. So it could be like, Aspen, or like San Francisco, cool guy, Hollywood. This guy was the suitcase guy. His name, you will understand in just a bit. So after being single from basically September 2021 to January 2022, I decided it was time to explore some dating apps. Some friends, encouraged this. And so I felt I was ready for it. I'm always in my industry. I'm always meeting a lot of people. I'm always, meeting clients, and I'm always out and about. I didn't want to date anybody in the industry because I had already done that. And I really just like to keep my professional life extremely professional. And of course, I can't date clients because that would just be inappropriate. So dating apps was a great solution for me to be able to meet people that I wouldn't meet otherwise. And so I began to explore those. And it's a little bit eye-opening, I will tell you. Endless possibilities. So many men in so little time. So I did what any, new girl would do to dating. And I started setting aside some time for some dates. And very quickly, I connected with this particular guy on Bumble. No offense to Bumble. It's no longer my favorite dating app, but probably because maybe it has a little bit of negativity surrounding it because of this story. He was dashingly handsome, very charismatic, really great communicator, charming. We had great conversations. In fact, we had a virtual date the very first night we connected through that app. There's a little virtual date option through Bumble. And so you can basically FaceTime each other through the app. And so we did that. And the FaceTime date went extremely well. We had several virtual dates after that. And he didn't live in the state. He lived in Wyoming. And so after a few virtual dates, he had said, that he wanted to come out to Arizona and take me on a proper date, which of course I agreed to. And I asked him where he would stay when he came out, and he said that his mom lived out here. He had family out in Arizona. So that was his plan. He'd come and take me on a date, and then he would visit his mom. That way he was able to kind of, do two things in one trip. So I was beyond excited. And then I did what every girl also does. I called my best friends and I told them all about this. And they've been, up to speed along the way, and also very excited because at this point, I was maybe 35. So at this point, I've never dated before. And I've been that friend this entire time that's been the friend going through all of my friends' relationships as they are going through them, because they dated, many friends that were dating a lot in their 20s, and I was the married one. So they were sharing all these stories with me, and they're very entertaining sometimes. So now the tables had turned. Now many of them were married, and here I was the single one. So now they were saying, now we are living vicariously through you. So we started talking about this person, and my one of my best friends, she said, have you looked this guy up? And I said, no, I don't like to do that. I don't like to look people up before I go out with them. Like I like to be able to go out with them and then make my own, assumptions and get to know them and ask questions. I don't like to look people up because I don't like to prejudge them. I don't even do this with clients, actually. I like to, I'll have my assistant maybe look up and see just to make sure they're legitimate, but I don't want to find anything out about them. I don't want to know what companies they own, what they have, what they don't have. I would rather have us have candid conversation and me get to know them, the true them, rather than looking them up and, prejudging them for anything. So I approached dating the same way. Well, my girlfriends did not think that that was a very good idea. So they said, we will do it for you. And so one of my best friends did a deep dive, and she's very good at this. I kind of feel like she could be like one of those CIs. I mean, truly, she's so good at this. She found out a lot of information on this guy. And one of the things that she did find out is that, one, he had been married, which he did not disclose. She thought that was a red flag. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, but she said, did you tell him you were married? And I said, yes, I did. She said, well, that would be a time frame in which someone would also say that they were married if you had in fact disclosed that you were. Again, I let it go. And there was one other thing. He did have a child. And she said, did he tell you that he had a child? I said, I assumed he didn't have any kids because we've talked about, my daughter several times. And she said, and he shared no parenting stories. And I said, no, but his child was very sick with something called hydrocephalus, something that I actually have a lot of knowledge about because I volunteer in Haiti. And when I volunteer in Haiti, we do a lot of life-saving surgeries that involve babies being born with hydrocephalus. And if you don't know what that is, it's actually extremely rare in the US. Babies born in Haiti, there's a lack of folic acid in women's diets in Haiti and in some other third world countries. But Haiti, this is very predominant. And so a lot of times when babies are born, because of the lack of folic acid in the mother's diet, the baby is born with fluid on the brain. And if this is not something that, if this medical procedure of them putting a shunt in the through the skull is not done early on, then fluid will continue to build up, and that's when you see sometimes babies in National Geographic where their head is larger because fluid is accumulating on their brain. So this is very rare in the US for a child to be born with this because obviously in our diets, we have the ability to be able to have a lot of things available to us and healthy foods and such. So anyway, he had not told me about this. He had not told me that he was married. He did not tell me that he had a child. Now, I thought to myself, this is actually a pretty severe thing. And I told my one friend about this who didn't know much about this, that the life expectancy is in fact quite short, probably not past the age of 6 or something. And so in my heart, I thought that this was a conversation that should be something that I'm sure he was going to discuss with me in person. And so I was going to give him that opportunity. Now, we were talking that night after I found out this information, and I thought I would just sprinkle in a story of me being in Haiti and that maybe he would perhaps then tell me this. So as we were talking that night on the phone, we were talking about passions, and I saw the right moment to bring up that story, and I did, and talked about this one particular boy that I had established a relationship with there because his family and I became close throughout his surgery. And he didn't bring it up at that time. And so I started feeling uncomfortable because now I had given him an in and a moment that he could have told me, and he didn't. So I was already feeling a little bit uncomfortable, but figured when we went out, I'm sure this is something that he would bring up. So the date night came, he flies in. I had the longest work week and the longest work day that day. So actually, I showed up at the date already kind of a little bit tired, which is very unlike me. But our reservation was at 9:00 at night. Thinking back, it was actually probably pretty late, and I'm not sure why it had to be that late, but he arrives with his suitcase in tow, and we're at the restaurant. And, we have small talk. Obviously, we had a lot of conversations leading up to this. So finally, he does go into this backstory about his life and tells me this about his son, tells me about his marriage, divorce, his son, what their relationship is like now, that, his son, obviously what he has is terminal. And now, obviously, I already know all this. So I feel quite bad that I know all this information, and now he's finally telling me. And imagine, it's so hard in that moment. And this is why I don't look people up. But you now know this really deep, vulnerable thing about them, and you have to pretend like you don't know. And it's quite heavy. And so after he tells me all of this, he then does something very odd. He says, now that I've told you something so vulnerable about me, what do you have to share? And I'm kind of silent. I don't really know what to say. And so I kind of fumble over my words. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not really prepared to share something super serious, but he's just staring at me, and I'm feeling obligated to match his story of something deep. So I decide that I will share things about my family and my mom and her alcoholism and abuse. And so I launch into that story. And once I started talking about that, it was hard to stop talking about it. And then I started feeling very uncomfortable, but he had expressed that he didn't want the date to end. At this time, it's like 11:00 at night, and he's got his suitcase. Obviously, my car is there. So I agree that we can continue the date over towards my house. So we go over to the Arizona Biltmore. We walk around. I am actually really quite tired. Now I'm yawning. I'm kind of trying to end it, but he's not catching really a lot of social cues. And at this point, I'm feeling pretty exhausted, which I didn't realize is because emotionally, I just told this story to a complete stranger. And I keep saying that I'm tired. And finally, he does kind of get the cue. He slowly gets up, walks me to my car, but lingers for a little bit. And I remember he has this suitcase. So I'm thinking, is he thinking that I'm going to drive him somewhere? Is he thinking I'm going to invite him over to my house, which I'm not ready to do? So I open the door and then put my hand on the suitcase. Then he does get the social cue to then remove the suitcase from the car. And then he does call an Uber. I go home. I'm feeling a little bit weird, but we have a date the next night. It's already set up. Obviously, he flew in to see me. And so the next day rolls around and he sends me the kindest, sweetest message. So I agree to go on the second date. Now, throughout the day, for some reason, I was feeling a little bit odd. So I pushed back the time a couple of times. And I was running late from a work appointment, and I had pushed it back now a third time, and I got to the restaurant a little bit late. And he called me out on it 3 or 4 times throughout the dinner. And I just had responded saying that I had communicated, early on throughout the day that I was going to be late. It's not as if I just didn't show or if I was late by 2 hours and didn't let him know. I was very communicative. So it was odd that he was calling me out on this tardiness over and over again. He obviously didn't like that I kept him waiting and had pushed back his plans. Now, also, I noticed that his suitcase is with him on the floor. And I said to him, "Where are you staying tonight?" And he looks at me with this look and he says, "Well, not at my mom's." And so at this point, I know that he and his baggage are going to be staying with me. And I'm not really sure how to get out of the situation. And so now I'm prolonging the date. Basically, what he did to me the night before, I am now doing to him. So it turns into a walk and ice cream. I'm trying to do everything possible to prolong the time period in which it's actually going to be time for him to come back to my house. So eventually, we get back into my car. We go back to my house. And now I'm thinking, how did I get myself into this situation? Now this person is at my house, sitting on my couch. And now I'm trying to keep him out of my bedroom, right? So now this goes into an hour-long thing on my couch. And I'm sitting, you can't see me unless you're watching this on YouTube. So he's sitting next to me. And I am sitting with my legs completely facing forward. And when I look at him, I'm turning to the side. So it's not even as if I'm engaging and we're sitting close to each other, looking in each other's eyes. There's definitely some disconnect with our body language for sure. And I'm thinking he's going to pick up on that, but he doesn't. And I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this space, and I can't, or I feel like I can't. And so we finally, he reaches over and kisses me, and then it's time to go to bed. So I end up obviously going to my bedroom. He follows me in there. And let me be clear that the chemistry at this point, it's not hot and heavy. It's not like, he has me pressed against the wall and is taking me to my bedroom. It is not that type of chemistry. I'm literally walking to my room and he's following behind me. And then I'm also thinking, I hope this is safe, which I guess I didn't feel like something really bad was going to happen, but I certainly didn't want to be doing what I was doing. Unfortunately, once we got into my room, he told me to sit on the bed, which I did. And this guy, he's 6'4", and I don't know how much he weighed, but he's a buff guy. And I'm 5'6" and 120 pounds. And so he asked me to sit on the bed, and so I sat. And he asked me to close my eyes. And I did. And I couldn't close them for longer than about 10 seconds, which he joked about. And then he asked me to lay down. And so I did. And then he took off my clothes and I let him. And the whole time I'm lying there and I'm going through this narrative in my head. And I keep saying, it's okay, Amanda. This is fine. You are a 35-year-old woman. You can have sex with a guy. It's not that big of a deal. Everybody else does this. You can go on a date and have sex with somebody. You're an adult. You can do adult things and be an adult. This isn't that big of a deal. Really, in my head, I'm going through this narrative. This is fine, right? Be more fun. Be more free. You haven't been single, so just it's fine. So we obviously end up having sex. He's on top of me. We end up having sex. And afterwards, now I don't really move from the position of just being on my back, by the way. I don't know how he didn't pick up on any social cues, but whatever. Afterwards, I get under the covers, and now I'm feeling pretty bad. So now I'm laying on my side. I'm crying. He does not know that I'm crying. The next morning, his flight is super early. I pretend to be asleep as long as possible because never in my life have I actually been in this situation where I've gotten myself into this position and wanted it to end so badly. He clearly wanted to have sex again, but I was not having it. And I made an excuse, pretended to be asleep, that there wasn't going to be a lot of time. Eventually, we got up. He gathered up his baggage and put it in his suitcase. I made him coffee and gave him a hug, and he left. Then I did what every girl does after this as well. I called my best friend. And as soon as she answered, my voice is quivering. If you've ever been in this moment and had this happen, I'm sure that you know what I'm talking about. So my voice is quivering, and now they know that something has happened. So I tell them, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I talk about this with several friends, and a lot of them, whether it was to make me feel better or whether it was true, I do believe much of it is true. A lot of them shared similar experiences at some point in their life. And so after a little bit of time, he kept contacting me, and I actually could not say to him what I wanted to say. I was just so uncomfortable for some reason. And finally, after about a week or so, I called him and told him that I couldn't see him again, and that when he showed up with this suitcase, that I felt no choice. I felt like I had no choice but to let him stay at my house, and that the physical part I didn't want to do. And I wanted to know if he felt that. I said, I'm sure that you felt that. I was so curious. My friend said, don't do this. Like, it's not worth it. Like, basically, just let this guy go, like ghost him. I'm like, no, I want to know. And when I said that, he said that he did feel that. He said that he knew. And then perhaps it was because he had shared with me that information about, this is his quote, about my dying son. And to that, I didn't even know what to say. And my friends said that, they said, you found a true narcissist because he's making you feel responsible for all these bad things, none of which you caused. And so it turns out the lesson learned from this also is that I discovered a lot of my discomfort with him was the forced disclosure of my secrets within my family that I'd shared with very few people. In fact, I'd only shared those things with my ex-husband, my very close friends, and then my ex-boyfriend, people that I was very close to and trusted intimately, because I shared those very intimate details about my life. And the reason why this felt so dysregulating is because I had shared intimate details with someone that I didn't trust yet and that I didn't have an intimate relationship with. And so it is as if my entire body was feeling this panic, anxiety, and danger. And instead of fighting and being able to get myself out of the situation, I felt as if I was a little girl and just couldn't escape. And so some lessons we learned the hard way. This is a terrible one for me to admit because I feel like I'm one of those girls that rarely puts myself into situations like these. And although that wasn't my fault, I should have just said no. But sometimes we ignore our gut. Sometimes we ignore our intuition. And sometimes there's some baggage that we can handle, and other times even a carry-on suitcase with just a little bit of baggage is a little bit or a lot of it too much. And so there you have it. Lesson 1, never again was I about to accept someone else's baggage, even just one little suitcase of it, because this girl, she learns quick. And so after that, we'll be on to lesson 2, which is let them lead. And that is for the next episode, because I can only unpack, enough baggage, and this one suitcase is enough at this moment in time. So thank you for listening. If you have a similar story, I'm sorry, but also comment or message me as well. Thank you for listening to that wild story, everyone. That is You're It Girl.